Hello and welcome to this episode of the Working Wellbeings podcast. Today's guest is Robert Manson. So Robert is the founding director of Haldane Health, and he recently left the position of global head of wellbeing at energy company RWE. He's also worked as head of occupational health and wellbeing at NPower, Morrisons and GSK. So he's got a really varied career across several industries. He talks about the differences working across these roles and also the challenge of working globally, and gives some great insight into how to integrate well-being and safety in a way that works. Plus, if you want to hear some great ways to influence people to take up well-being across a business, whether that's in the boardroom at senior level right down to the front line, then this is definitely an episode you'll be interested in. Enjoy. Welcome to the latest episode of the Working Wellbeings podcast. Absolutely delighted to be joined by Robert Manson on the podcast today. So I'll hand straight over to you, Robert. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Introduce yourself and your background.
Gosh, where do I begin? It seems so long ago. Interesting, my background. So I'm a nurse. I started off as a learning disability nurse, and then I kind of in Leeds, and then I thought, I fancy doing some general. And I just went to London and I did general nurse. And I didn't like that either, thinking long term, it was too much clinical stuff. And I remember talking to an occupational health doctor. He said, "Listen, lad, why don't you think about occupational health? Because that's what I do." I've never thought about it, never had it before. So lo and behold, when I got married, I moved to the North East, and I couldn't get a job in a hospital for the grade I wanted. And I had this agency nurse thing, occupational health nurse. And I thought, what the hell's that? Maybe it's meant to be. Went to join an agency, stayed there for about 2 or 3 years, and then they said they wanted me to do a diploma in occupational health. So I ended up staying there, moved to GlaxoSmithKline three, 4 years later, and then kind of worked my way up from a site to a region to a country kind of level, and then the global level. So, I mean, that was I'll just give you a 25-year history, really, where we are with GlaxoSmithKline. And then I decided to change, move to Morrisons for a couple of years and get some retail experience. And then I've spent last 7+ years in RWE, which is a German energy company, which is completely different. And I think that's why I kind of moved after a while to say, actually, I want to broaden my horizons. So my background's as an occupational health nurse, and then actually went into this field of broadened it out between occupational health and wellbeing. And now my last role was head of global health and wellbeing for RWE. So that's kind of a
when did that role become wellbeing? Were you in a wellbeing role in GlaxoSmithKline, or was that?
Well, so I was. It was almost like employee health management, we used to call ourselves, and that was kind of that's we wanted something different rather than just call it wellbeing. Wellbeing wasn't really kind of taken off then, probably 10 years ago or so. It was mentioned, but when I moved to RWE, we created this occupational health and wellbeing. So it's the protection side, obviously the compliance and all the medicals we had to do. But the wellbeing was all a promotion of health. So if you had heart disease, you don't want to come to work unfit. The idea is to get to the person before they got ill. Yeah. And for me, that's just preventative medical care, really. And occupational health was around that. But the wellbeing bit is really about thriving. It's completely changed. Last probably, I think, the 10 years is everyone's going into it now, and without medical backgrounds. So my route was medical, I guess, to begin with.
Yeah. So what about that in terms of the field broadening out and having people not from a medical background? A good thing, bad thing?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, sometimes I go to conferences and I see I started off as in HR, did a week's certificate. Now they want to be head of health and wellbeing. I sometimes think, wow, you're taking a big role when you've had a little experience. And I've seen people been at the role for 20, 30 years in the medical care and haven't been as good in wellbeing. So I think it depends on the person. And I think it depends on the kind of skills and attributes they bring. I think it helps to have knowledge in a health and wellbeing area, because managers and senior managers challenge you. And if you haven't got the background and you can't have that kudos or provide those answers in a boardroom, then it gets you get seen through really sometimes. So that it's handy. I don't think it's essential. I think it's benefits you having some qualifications.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the skills, actually, to be a good wellbeing manager. You said, obviously, there's different for different people, but do you think there are a core set of I don't know, for whatever one of the better word, like competencies that a good well-being
Yeah,
manager should have, or
uh, yeah. Well, I think for me, the core leadership competencies, things like delegation and planning and project management, and I
mm,
think that they're all there. There's a couple that stand out for me, Matt. I think is active listening
mm,
and coaching. And those three things, if you really, that the thing with the well-being is really listen to your people, really listen to your workforce as well, and making sure that those needs, so when you do a needs assessment, that's all part of the plan,
mm,
and open, transparent, honest communication. I think people need well-being managers they can trust and they go to people. So if you're
yeah,
not got those interpersonal skills, people won't go to you.
yeah, yeah. That's an
For
interesting one. So
me.
how do you use active listening on an organizational level? Are you talking like literally listening to people who you're having conversations with, or do you
Like,
think?
yeah, interesting. When I go around the kind of a week, I mean, obviously, I spent some time in the boardrooms, and questions like careful coaching questions is really useful. So what's really troubling you right now? What's
Mm,
keeping you awake at night? And you look at the CEO in the eyes, and they go, "Oh, funny if you ask Robert," and then it comes out.
mm,
There's no point, I think that's active listening skills, but using those communication skills to really understand what it is at the heart of the issue that the CEO in the boardroom want, but also on the plant, when in the power stations or in the shop floor,
mm,
what are people's agendas and priorities, and then
mm.
you actually feed that into the mix of things when you're planning your well-being strategy, I guess.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because we talk a lot about that, and we've spoken to some people on this podcast about influencing senior leaders. Right?
Yeah.
Everyone's been talking about it for the last decade. How do we get health and well-being on this senior level agenda? And we tend to talk about things like business cases and collection of data and things like this, which are all important. But you're talking about more of a personal connection to those individuals and really listening
Yeah.
to them. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I think that those are really important. What's the ROI? What's
Mm,
the return of investment, Robert? I do all that. You have to do that. Okay, that's bread and butter. But
mm,
also, what's the right thing to do? So
mm,
sometimes I now go to the board and say, right, what's the data? Why should I do this? And I say, why shouldn't you do it? Show me the
mm,
data why we wouldn't do that. Now that maybe come with experience, and maybe I'm getting a bit cynical in my old age, but I'm kind of been in enough people. They all want the data. They all want return on investment. I'm saying, well, just look outside your organisation. Why are these people doing this? They're
mm,
doing it just because the data says. They're doing it because employees don't want to work for companies that burn them out anymore. So
mm,
suddenly, that's my theory in with it. And I look to my boardroom. They say, I don't want to track people and burn them out, Rob. We spend millions and millions of pounds and dollars and euros hiring people, and then they leave us within a year because they think it's
mm.
just not a place that they want to do business with. So
Yeah.
that cultural thing is huge, and I think that's where wellbeing needs to kind of embed itself into the whole business, not just see as a bolt-on or an add-on. And it
Mm,
ticks the box, it looks really nice, but actually really have those conversations at the shop floor and the boardroom. So I think a top-down, bottom approach is absolutely, from my experience of 38 years or so plus, is essential for me.
yeah. And do you think in your various roles you achieve that in terms of having that
Oh,
influence on the business?
I've made some real mistakes, Matt. Be honest, I've pitched at the wrong people at the wrong level. But that's the learning.
Mm,
I mean, best piece of advice it was when I tried to prove what stress was to a head of finance. He said, Robert, don't bother with the data. Should we just get on and do it though? And
mm,
I was completely. Why did I pitch when I normally do to try and go in for what's the right thing to do? I went in with all the data,
mm,
completely missed it, and then he went, well, why don't we? I think we should just do it anyway. So
mm.
sometimes it's knowing your people and knowing what level, what sort of floats their boat, really. So
Yeah,
some like data, some like quantitative data, which is just the opinions of people are, we want to do this. It's the right thing to do. So yeah, I think learning from your errors, or actually learning from your learnings, is actually not a bad thing that
yeah,
wellbeing managers probably need to expect to do, I think.
yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting one. This idea of influencing is coming out quite strongly from the people that we speak to and the people within our community. But yeah, that take on it in terms of influencing different people in different ways. It sounds obvious when you say it out loud, but yeah, it's not something that we've necessarily heard before from some of the people that we've spoken to. Um, what about without obviously divulging too much confidential information about the organizations that you've worked for? you mind me asking about some of the differences? Because you've worked in quite a diverse range of
Yeah.
industries, right? Do you see any real differences there, or is it just people? Or
Yeah, no, I think there are differences, and I think there's also cultures and subcultures with the organisation. So the more global you get, the
mm,
more agile you have to be in terms
mm,
of what is it that they will keep, what floats the boats, as I say, what sort of how I get it. So the German, for example, my company, last company, are probably slightly less or more private about things like mental health
mm,
than I'm used to in England, for example. We've been on a journey, and it's but in Germany, they just you have to respect that that's a little bit more private, and they're not quite comfortable to talk about it. The
mhm,
same in when I was in Taiwan with GSK. You have to think, how do I actually present this the way that's not offensive, but also doesn't push them too hard, too fast?
mm,
So yeah, I think you have to do the industries, but also I think your industries differences, but they're also globally there's countries there's differences. So Morrisons was, let me just be honest, it was a really kind of like fast pace, get it
mm,
on, get it done. Return on investment was pretty important to them because the sale price wasn't, profit margin wasn't much.
yeah.
But in GSK was you're talking a massive organisation, and it's about, I remember now that it's do more, feel better, live longer was the mission,
Mhm,
and we had to get behind that. And they're a bunch of scientists. They love the data, and this let's just go on and let's do the right thing didn't really wash with them sometimes.
yeah, I've
Yeah.
got you. They wanted to see the data as well.
The research, yeah. What's the research? Because they spend all day researching. So what I come along saying, let's just get on and do this, guys. They go, whoa, show me the data.
Yeah, yeah. Going off piste a little bit, but I'm really interested in those cultural differences because again, like a lot of people who'd be listening to this are either in a global well-being role or aspiring to have that sort of role in the future. So when you're managing that, I've always wondered what sort of approach did you take in terms of centralized and localized? So is it a case of having everything from a center that feeds outwards, or do
Yeah.
you have local level interventions, or is it a mix
Well,
of the both? Or that always
there was some.
seems quite complicated to me.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think some of my brand. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I actually left Occupational for a couple of years and moved to safety, and I managed on one of the Glaxo sites, and that taught me a lot about how to actual prevention. I was seeing people with back pain coming into my clinic, and I thought if I can get involved in workplace design, I can stop the back pain. So I
Mm,
ended up in safety, ended an MSc in ergonomics and health ergonomics. Then came back into Occupational and used that kind of knowledge to broaden my kind of things. So going back to your question, it really is about, for me, it's utilizing those, having that knowledge base, but also thinking globally and acting locally. So
mm,
one of the things I'm really favour of is when I did my ergonomics MSc was participatory ergonomics, and all that means is the person centered.
mm,
The people know probably what to do themselves rather than to the board telling them what to do because they're doing a job all day.
yeah.
That human methodology, but participatory is utilizing them to come up with the solutions because actually 9 out of 10 they probably know what the right thing to do is anyway.
Mm,
So that's the active listening piece. And I think that's globally, that method is globally, empowerment works globally, but
yeah.
give people the autonomy to come up with their own solutions. You can steer it centrally and say, here's the vision
Mm,
and the mission, and here's the some tools, resources we think you'd benefit from, and you can dip in and dip out of that. But you
mm,
have the autonomy to make a difference on the site. And the site managers or from the plant want to be proud enough. We manage this site, so give us a tools, but let us get on with it.
mm,
Don't micromanage me. Don't keep telling me you're the expert and I don't know what to do. So it is a coaching relationship, and you're facilitating change in a positive way, but utilizing the people on the ground.
mm, yeah. I like that description that you use. Come back to that idea of coaching people through this. It's practicing what we preach as well, right? Because as well-being professionals, it's all coaching and
But I
human
think also
centered. But
sometimes
then,
people say you're the expert. Tell us what to do, and I'm saying, well, I can say so, but would you do it?
mm,
That's the real challenge because I've done it before. I've said all these programs up and I'm not doing that. It comes from corporate. Sod
yeah,
that. And
yeah,
and if you haven't got that relationship, you lose that trust. They'll either won't follow it or they'll just reinvent their own stuff and not align with it. So that's why
mm,
you've got to be flexible. Set the strategy force. Absolutely set this tools resource up essentially, but focus on making a change locally where you can, where you've got the people. I'm a great believer in having wellbeing champions. You can't have wellbeing experts
mm,
sat in companies without a bit of an army of active supporters around there.
Mm.
Like we have safety reps. We've had safety reps for years, but we haven't had wellbeing reps till recently, really.
Yeah, yeah. And it can't be empire building, right? It can't be. You want to influence people. You want people to take it seriously, but at the same time, I mean, I guess I'll ask that as a question. So if you found out that a part of the organization, perhaps globally, you know, that was taking forward an intervention on their own that you'd not been a part of, and that didn't necessarily align with your strategy, how did you deal with that tension?
Well, it's almost like, catch people doing good things. So for me, what one tactic is you can go and say, that's a lot of bloody rubbish. Stop that. I'm telling you what, I'm the expert. Or you can go in and say, do you know what? I'm really curious why you've done that. Isn't it? Show me what the benefits have been. And actually, would you mind sharing that with every other sites? Suddenly they're going, I'm not being told off, not being out of rollicking. I'm actually, this person's actually interested, and I'm quite proud of my change. So if you can share the learnings, and actually over time, they end up following follow the right path anyway. If it's the wrong path initially, but most things people do proud to come up with their own solutions, and I think we should harness that and not see it as empire building and say they've just broken off scripts. I've seen where we smash ideas down, and actually some people come up with the most novel ideas possible, and actually half the price of what I'd been planning from a central position. So yeah, I think again, it's going back to facilitation and coaching and sharing their learnings. That for me was a big important part of my success, I think.
Yeah, nice one. So what would you count as your biggest successes?
Yeah, so I look back at that just recently when I kind of just was reflecting in the year. We always write down what successes are in the year, we celebrate it. Helping I think probably for me, 15 years ago or 10 years ago, probably, we weren't having conversations about people's mental health. Let's say the mental health conversation. I'm actually, boss, I'm not feeling great and I don't feel up to it to doing that task. Those conversations weren't happening 10 years ago in my areas. Now it's, you know what, and you want to, I've noticed you weren't yourself, and we want to know, can you tell me a little bit more? How can I support you? And how can I support yourself? I feel quite proud of the fact we've helped together, not me, but we've had to have that conversation in the boardroom and on the shop floor. People, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay that your physical health as well as your mental health are now part of your important part of your safety, health, and wellbeing culture. Those conversations weren't happening 10 years ago. Safety was over there and health was over there, and wellbeing was somewhere nebulous in the middle that if you had a bit of fluffy time to do. Now it's health and wellbeing and safety are now a critical part of the business. And I only profess, like, for 10 years I've been saying you can't have safety without health. You just can't. People's not slept all night and they come to work, they've been round with their partner or their child or whatever like that. They come to work, the half of not sleep, not had breakfast, the blood sugars are low, and then you expect them to go to a critical safety task. That's just set up for failure. Those conversations they're having, we're saying, are you really all right? Let's have a point of risk assessment, and how do you feel about it? Stress isn't talked about it more, acknowledged more. Burnout now in Germany, in Netherlands, we talk about burnout more than stress, but people are much more attuned into seeing that as real occupational hazards that needs managing, the same as lifting and handling or chemical exposure. And that transition's probably for me has happened, well, I think in my company last 5 years, 7 years, not 10 years.
That's really interesting. It was one of the things I'm quite excited about, really, with the new ISO standard. It's a year old now, right? But the ISO standard, and I'm seeing this within certain industries, is safety critical industries where they take safety incredibly seriously, seem to now be making the transition to wellbeing becoming important as well. And I'm seeing that it's landing culturally within those organizations, which is there's a bit of a paradox in there, perhaps, because stereotypically you talk about energy firms, you talk about manufacturing, you talk about these sorts of safety critical roles, primarily male, right? And who are less likely to talk about this stuff stereotypically when it comes to mental health and wellbeing. But actually, if you come at it from the safety perspective, it seems to be changing behavior. I don't know. What do you think?
No, it's actually right because what the previous company, I mean, I don't mind that they are technically brilliant engineers.
Mm,
Absolutely, build a power station, run a power station. I've never seen skill knowledge like it. But they like any other company, they promote people. Say, can you now have a team from being an
mm,
expert to a team? And suddenly they need coaching and support for that. And their expertise isn't on people management,
mm,
and they don't mind saying it. So I need some help. And I think that's where we set sometimes leaders up for failure, where we just say, "Oh, tomorrow you've just got 20 people, and over you go, get on
mm,
with it." And
mm,
and yeah, so for me, I think it's that relationship with managers. And when managers trust you, they'll say, "Can I have support? I need a bit of support here. I'm not quite sure what to say to this employee who's depressed, and I want to keep him, but I don't know what to say. Have you
mm,
any advice for me?" And that
mm,
I think that's well-being in the sense that an action there, helping people to manage people,
mm,
and their health and well-being is important. But engineers go to safety because it's something they can control. They
mm,
can put all the control measures in the plant, and it's easier with safety. And that's even though it's technically very challenging. But
mm,
a person turns up and with his physical, mental, emotional state, and he's thinking, "Well, I don't know what's happened at home." And in
mm,
fact, I've heard managers say, "I don't want to get involved with that, Robert, because that's private work. I just want him to do his job."
mm.
I'm saying, well, to do his job, you need to think about
Exactly.
is his is the holistic person coming to work. Because
Mm,
if you put a critical job without even checking in on him, you could probably kill him actually. And that's
mm,
the reality
mm,
when you see fatalities, fatigue and distraction, mobile phone work, driving to work. That's why we have laws against that. But
mm,
when we come to work, sometimes we forget that's part of well-being.
mm,
Being alert and having your cognitive ability on your job, that's safety, health, and well-being combined really
mm,
together.
mm. Yeah, yeah. That's what yeah, I'm fully on board with that. I feel like safety gives well-being a little bit of a hard edge that it needs in a way. You don't necessarily want to mandate yoga sessions, right? Or mindfulness or anything like that. But in the same way that you go to a building site and you might roll your eyes at having to put the hard hat on and the safety vest and all the rest of it, but you do it, right? You just do it because it's part of the job and you need to be safe. And if you don't do it, there are consequences for that. It comes to mental well-being. You think about working incredibly long hours or outside of your contracted hours and that leading to burnout. You might roll your eyes at well-being, but people still operate in an unsafe way, essentially, for their psychological
Well,
health.
that's right, Matt. I part of the benefit of being in safety, I kind of got into my head around that world. If I was to ever get well-being on the agenda, I had to get in this room when I speak their language, or
Mm,
else I was the fluffy guy that talked about the soft stuff, and
mm,
what they've no time for. Suddenly, I'm saying the root cause of this accident is actually this fatigue, and maybe we should think about some of the working hours and some of the working conditions and human factors issue. And suddenly, wow, I never thought about that. So
mm,
using common language and embedding well-being into the business that may be safety focused is actually also a good thing. And
mm,
similar to HR, sickness absence. I think people at HR think, oh, I'll employ well-being manager because it'll reduce my sickness absence by half. Well, it doesn't work like that. Of course,
mm,
it's much more. It's about leadership behaviours and line management responsibilities.
mm,
But just going back to that safety thing before I don't want to dominate on safety, but they have life-saving rules.
mm,
I follow the procedures before I go to work. I actually to lock out, tag out before my guarding. So they have these rules, right?
mm,
I challenged them a few this last couple of years. I said, why don't we have well-being behaviours that we all sign up for?
mm.
Not have to be a rule. It's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
way of working. We don't have back-to-back meetings anymore. We brought
Mm,
55-minute meetings in. They went, what? Well, think about it. You're about to back. You create this. You're late for your next meeting, or you're still thinking your head's in the last meeting before you go to another meeting. Well, a
mm,
5-minute recovery period, because recovery is actually good for you, of course.
mm,
You change your state. We actually don't expect to answer emails after 5 o'clock. No, we don't have a rule about it. Somebody switch the, I think it's Volkswagen, switch off the email thing after 5 o'clock. Well, we don't. That's the rule. Well, trust people. It's not good if someone's got a working mother that wants to send an
mm,
email at 7 o'clock. But the main important thing, they don't expect a reply of people that work 9 to 5. So
mm,
you could, for me, we have these healthy behavior, healthy habits that we could build in, like the living safety, like the safety rules, but just do it a smarter way. So you're almost saying safety, health, and well-being has you have set behaviours that we all follow, and actually, isn't it great? We all work together. So
Mm.
it's not enforced on you, but what happens, I see, is that there's some teams then do this. They go, what are they doing?
Mm.
Why can't stop somebody doing that? Of course, they cost nothing, these little behaviours.
Mm.
It costs
Mm.
absolutely nothing.
Yeah,
But they
absolutely.
engage people and they stop people being burnt out. So
Mm.
it's more productive, it's more efficient, and
Mhm.
actually costs a lot less by people not leaving the organisation, of course, long run.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely,
You got me
absolutely.
going now on safety, Matt.
No, look, I find that whole side of things fascinating with the ISO standard and all the rest of it. And I'm
Yeah,
really
yeah.
interested to see certain safety conscious industries looking at well-being now in a way that they weren't doing, a decade ago.
And this is the first time we've actually reduced a stress risk assessment outside the UK. I
Mhm.
mean, oh my God, they had to go to the Works Council, explain in Germany, explain what the risk assessment was. This is private. This is, well, it's, if I showed them, explain, oh no, we get that now.
Mm.
So in fact, we think this is really good because burnout's an important issue for us as the unions. So if you get people on your side by explaining carefully the benefits of doing something, I think people like the unions and other people, if they're seen as barriers, actually just jump on board if they see the benefit from it.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I think working globally is a real challenge, but actually it just needs thinking about culturally. Just be sensitive and respectful that you might get there in a different way
Mm.
through different means. I suppose what I'm saying.
Yeah, got you. So I asked you about successes, and you
Yeah,
touched on failures before, and the failure to influence people in certain ways. Have you got any other failures that stick out?
I had a great one. I was doing a leadership workshop in Taiwan, and they were, and I come to the point where mindfulness. We talked about mindfulness, and I said, this is really important for recovery. And for me, this leadership was all it's about managing your personal energy at the time. So I looked around these 30 odd rooms of these very senior executives in Taiwan, and I said, so does anyone do mindfulness here?
Mm.
And there was this deathly silence, as if and I thought, have I said it properly? Do people understand? And this HR director says, Robert, we're all Buddhists. We
Hmm.
do it several times a day. And I was thinking, I dropped me. I thought, why did I do the research? Of course,
Yeah.
they're Buddhists. Why did you think about that? Why did you
Mm.
do your homework? Because it was just embarrassing. And in
Mm.
fact, they led the mindfulness session. I've never known anything like it.
Mm.
So yeah, that was a bit of a faux pas rather than a mistake.
That's right.
But the main thing for me, I'm a bit impatient, Matt. And the main thing for me, don't rush things. So don't
Yeah.
expect change. And sometimes it's like with culture, particularly with changing behaviours, it's like flicking a pebble in a pond and creating these ripples. I want that ripple. I want a tidal wave, but
Mm.
it doesn't come. It may come for 2, 3, 4 years. And I
Mm.
think well-being managers are in, and I listen to some younger people. They want change now, and I used to be like that. But
Mm.
this stepping back and watching it and watching wakefulness, seeing it happen over time, is a real asset. And I've learned now to do that a bit better but I'm still impatient. But I think that's that's quite a tip that I expected too much too soon, particularly when people are to just thinking, well, I never even thought about my own mental health. Never mind having a
Mm.
conversation and bring it into a stress risk assessment. It sometimes takes years for these things to be fully accepted, rather than say, yeah, we're all doing it, we'll tick the box. But is it? It might be in use, but it might be in place, but is it in use? And that in use period can take 3, 4, 5 years at times.
Mm. Mm.
So yeah, don't rush things. That was my biggest area, I think.
Yeah, that's a good tip. That's a really good tip. Yeah, it comes from a good place, right? We're all passionate people, and well-being tends to draw
Yeah,
quite
but
a
can you? I
passionate
remember switching
workforce.
people on. I mean, I remember someone
Yeah.
I took a job with someone, and they were saying, right, what we're going to do? We're all going to have a jog at lunchtime, and we're all going to do this, and let's all get up your chairs. And she used to walk into the, and I was like, oh my god, here's this mad bloody well-being person, and it switched them
Yeah.
off. So
Mm.
you're thinking, well, actually, Derek, this bunch of middle-aged old men, they're not going to do that. So
Mm.
what sort of things do they do? And maybe it's a different tactic. Maybe it's just a gentle walk and get out of the workshop for a few minutes. So it's being in rapport with your workforce, and not expecting them to all jump at the corporate initiative.
Mm.
That's something it would switch me off, to be honest. So
Mm.
yeah, I've seen that happen before as well.
Mm. That's an interesting one. Yeah, it's empathizing, isn't it? You mentioned a few times, putting yourself in the position of the person who's on the other side of these interventions and these ideas. And would I do that if the email came through?
That's
Or
right.
yeah, absolutely. So On, you talked a little bit earlier about, navigating the role of a wellbeing leader, and obviously it's a really interesting path that you've taken through during that period. Do you think there's anything that helped you to progress your career over the
Yeah,
years?
it was yes. I think if I was given my time again, I'd probably have a mentor earlier. So
Mm,
some of my bosses have been great leaders. Some have been occupational physicians, some have been HR leads, some have been a really operational managers. But they've all been very patient, very focused, but all have different insights. So,
mm,
so I think what helped me was going to someone saying, actually not sure what to do next.
mm,
Or I think I've got this idea now. This is what I want. What do you think? I don't think I did that enough in my early days.
mm,
And the wise old words with the mentor said, well, you could do that, but have you thought about this?
mhm,
So I'm an other angle in. So what I think, kind of going back to your question of thinking what really helped me, I suppose, was that meant that the mentor. And
mm,
you look at all the evidence and you do research and you can look at the data says this.
mm,
But when you're in a company, if you work even if you work for yourself, go and talk to people in the business
mm,
who have kind of been there, done that, and got the scars.
mm,
That's don't be ashamed or embarrassed to ask for help, because I
mm,
think that mentorship is the most underused thing going. And I think it's just having that's valuable time for you to learn from and experiment, and they expect to learn, expect to have a few errors,
mm.
because actually that's how you learn, of course.
Mm, mm, mm. And I mean, look, bit of a plug for our community, obviously the Working Well community. That's what we want to do. We want to connect people, because we've heard from quite a few people it can be lonely, right? In that sort of
It
well-being
can be
position.
really lonely, and I think there's a fallacy. I mean, I've been here quite a few decades, but I've seen people, been here years, writing a strategy, writing all that kind of using data. What sort of report writing? How did you do it? I don't think I did enough of that, Matt, if I'm
Mm,
honest. And I was proud of I've got this global job. I'm the expert, and I thought, actually, I'm not really. I might have been given this role, but that's the time when you really need more help and having a community and a network. And I
mm,
learned very quickly. Thought, well, you know some stuff, Robert, but you don't know everything. And there's people out there you can really tap into. So, LinkedIn's great and that's fine, but the odd email, but it's that deep conversation and that
mm,
network with people in similar positions. That would be my advice. Do it as soon as you can, because that's how you
mm.
really learn from each other, really. And
Yeah,
it's not a competition, of course. We're all in it for the same purpose.
yeah, that's it, isn't it?
You
Yeah.
know, we're out here to keep people safe and well. I mean,
Mm,
that's the end of the day. So the more you can do, the more you can learn, the more you can put into your own practice, I guess.
mm, mm. Yeah, no, it's good. So, if what was the best piece of advice you received? Can you think of a best piece of advice you did receive from a mentor at
Yeah,
one point or
I think
another?
I've had a pattern. I've had a pattern. Someone said to me recently, for the last few years, slow down, Robert, and go with the energy. Go with the energy. I
Mm,
thought, well, slow down. That's going to be a tough one for me. But actually, slow down. Doing less is more. Making significant small changes is better than throwing lots of stuff at it.
mm,
And recently my CFO said, "Can you switch stuff off, Robert? Can you do what's really going to make the most important difference?"
mm,
But slow down and go with energy stuck with me, because I said that to my team recently. Just slow down. It's like Messi at football. He's not the fastest player, is he? But he's got
mm,
this perspective over the pitch, and he slows down and he goes, right, if he's going to, and he passes the ball very, very, very carefully.
mm,
Um, but he's actually, that's an example. I always go on football, but slow down. Sometimes you get a different perspective, and going with energies, and it might be a fast-paced energy in the company, or it might be really slow, resistant change, and therefore you've got to go at a pace
mm,
where your majority of people go. You can
mm,
like put the healthy ripples and give them health nudges and show the way, but if you're too fast too soon, you switch people off.
mm,
I've seen
mm,
too many people leave jobs because, oh, it's not for me. I said, well,
mm.
maybe it's that you just went in a different too far too fast.
Yeah, got frustrated by it. Yeah.
Yeah, frustration is a big thing for well-being leaders, because they expect to be hitting things straight away.
Yeah.
And some you can, absolutely,
Mm,
but some you
mm,
can't.
mm. So you mentioned about slowing it down, but then earlier you mentioned retail. I'm assuming you didn't slow it
Well,
down there, or was it a different type of?
maybe that's why I only stayed 2 years. But sometimes you've got to take jobs and think. I've got contact with Morrisons. They're a great company. I love my time there. But sometimes you don't fit. You got to say, am I the right fit for my culture? Do my values and beliefs match where I am? And if it isn't, then you've got to question yourself. Do I really? Am I doing my best work? I see people stay in companies for many, many years, and leave for the right reasons. Yeah, don't get burnt out yourself. So yeah, be careful who you work with. I always say, do good work with good people, and then you'll flourish.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's practicing what you preach, isn't it? It's that's what you're trying to create across an organization. You're trying
to, but I mean, I'm practicing a bit more now, Matt. But in the early days, I didn't do that as much. And as you get on your careers, you think, if only I'd slow down. If only. But the thing is, I'm glad I realised it even after a while that I know now what I should have done rather than keep doing what I did, which didn't work.
Yeah, I've got you. Okay. So anything else in terms of navigating that role as a wellbeing leader you'd add? You mentioned there's some good advice, there's some great tips, there's some great advice, especially for someone setting out.
Here's my view. Sometimes, again, I've seen people take these big global wellbeing roles and they've been head of IT, and you think, well, what's that going to do with wellbeing? But if you've got the right skill set, that's fine. As leadership behaviours, I haven't got a problem with it. But it's embedding it at all levels, so you should be able to articulate at the boardroom as much as you can on the shop floor. Sometimes if I do a Gemba, for example, or which is go and look and see in the workplace, and I talk to a manager, I try and talk to them the same things as I do to the boardroom, because I know it's difficult and a different tone and a different pace, but actually, if you be authentic, I suppose what I'm saying is people smell it very quickly if you're not being authentic, and operate it, being able to at different levels, no matter how senior you are, it always goes down well.
Yeah, that's good advice. That's great. So I guess we've finished up, really. I just wanted to ask you about the state of the industry and wellbeing in terms of how you feel. You mentioned earlier, obviously there's been big changes in terms of how people talk about things like mental health. Have you seen any other changes in the field of wellbeing over the last?
I think it's catapulted massive. I mean, the opportunity now, chief wellbeing officers. Where the hell have they come from? I want someone on the boardroom level that talks about health and wellbeing. That never happens. Just I don't know, 5 years ago. So I think businesses have realised that you've got to have a holistic view of your people, and safety's always been there, and health and wellbeing now caught up with that a little bit more, but still a long way to go. So I think you see more roles now, and I think that businesses are taking it much more serious than they've ever done before. But it's my worry, I suppose, is getting the right people to do those roles and making sure that they're not just ticking a box. You say, we take health and wellbeing really serious. We've created this role, and then give no resource, no time, no commitment to it. But it looks great on the boardroom paper, doesn't it? It looks great in your social responsibility report. So in place and in use, please. I'd like to. I think we still. There's a lot of people still giving it lip service, even though it looks really good on paper. It still has got a long way to go yet, Matt. I think
there's a risk of that, isn't there? There's a risk of some of these big brands, these big organizations. It's virtue signaling, isn't it? It's look at our chief wellbeing officer and our big wellbeing team and our wellbeing program and our EAP, but actually you look at the burnout rates and retention figures, and they're not doing wellbeing.
No,
they're not doing wellbeing.
That's right. That's exactly right. But the intent, I think that what I would say, I'm trying to be positive on this. The intent is there. I think there needs to be people around them, whether it's externals, whether it's people from outside, people, consultants or specialists, to help drive that. Because when you're in a company, you mentioned something about being a lonely place, and you feel you're banging a drum, but no one's listening. So don't feel shy of asking for resources, saying, can we have somebody to do a particular project? I can't do it on my own. And I think companies expect the wellbeing roles to be all-encompassing, have massive, expectations are going to be huge, but they're not prepared to put the time, money, investments in it to make a difference. So I think it's the what's that film with Tom Cruise? Show me the money, But it's not just the money; it's the commitment and the drive. I think is important.
Yeah, I've got you. I've
Yeah.
got you. And because I have to mention this in every conversation I have, COVID. Do you think? Well, obviously, huge negatives associated with that for very many people, but from a well-being perspective, perhaps given some of this a bit of a kick up the backside, or
Yeah, I think in
I
some
don't know.
cases it has. I don't think for everyone. I think it's back to normal. It's like, oh, we're through that now.
Mm,
And so we didn't need the people didn't invest in it then, and they won't invest it afterwards. So I think there's that. There's that. But for me, I mean, without a doubt, I was talking to a lot of colleagues out. It was a great opportunity to sort of, attend conferences and networks and there were seminars and but the main thing was everyone was seeing the same thing. It wasn't great for your mental health. We were seeing 30-40% of people really struggling. Those people with that existing anxiety, depression,
absolutely.
go up and start deteriorating. Now, if you come from I've got health background, so we made sure that we made sure our case management and our support and our services were there. And I think our profile massively went up, and I think it went up for a lot of my colleagues. They're saying suddenly health is important now. But why did it take the pandemic, a virus, to realise that health is important? But some have really capitalised that, saying, "Well, now we've got them, we don't want to go back." So I think it's been there's some positive come out of it without a doubt. Flexible working, but again, I'm a great believer is you can't just say everyone works from home. That's brilliant. For some, it's not. If you've got a neurodiversity issue, the worst thing you can do is actually be completely on your own, not support, and vice versa, put them back in a noisy office. So it's horses for courses, having that individual needs assessment, and I think that's one thing I'm seeing companies do a lot more, more thoughtful than they have been before. And I think health and wellbeing has actually been nudged up a notch, without a doubt for me.
And that's another lesson from safety, right? Because the control measures that you put in place are absolutely best based on risk assessment and whatnot, needs assessment.
Absolutely, and you have a major fatal accident, and suddenly everyone wants to talk about safety for a while, and huge results are put into it. But when someone commits suicide at work, and sadly I've been involved with that, you kind of, it's different. It's like, well, let's just keep that bit quiet, and let's just like, well, why don't you put as much resource? Someone died at work. Why don't we actually? I know the factors might be different, but sometimes don't wait for a major incident to get your investments. I think you have to really think about, but utilize the opportunity to say, well, and sadly this has happened, but how can we make sure it never happens again? And let's put plans in place, not for now, but next 3 to 5 years time. And I think that's the thing about wellbeing. Don't look at 12-month plans. You should be looking 3 to 5 years time, because remember the slow down and go with the energy thing I mentioned about it. It can take that long for you to see any impact. And it's conversation in the corridors that you see the change, not the sickness absence figures. It's the people saying, I really like it around here. I really like this company now. Not that, if the sickness absence has gone down by 3%, it's I'm going to stay, I'm much more engaged, I'm more productive, I feel cared for. Now that companies still manage sickness absence figures, they should be looking at far wider issues to keep people safe and well at work. Better, much more leading metrics. That needs to come out in the future as well.
What's that? The
leading metrics, man. So it's sickness absence, but companies manage like the board level will say, "Oh, our absence level is 3%. It's not working, is it?" Whereas the engagement survey showing people, my manager has one-to-ones and talks about my health and well-being. But those are things you should be measuring, not just sickness absence. What I'm trying to say, but even those companies that invest in health and well-being still haven't got the right metrics yet. And I think that's another conversation. Maybe the
it's probably a
wellbeing
whole
group
other
to have.
session, right? Okay, great. So look, my penultimate question, I guess, before I ask in terms of what you're up to now and where our listeners can find you, are there any questions that you wish I'd asked you, and how would you have answered? Or do you think we've covered it all for now?
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking on my feet there, man. So I said to someone recently, I read somewhere, and I think it was can't remember where I read it from, but someone said to me, Robert, what's the one thing that you should have done less of? So that's a question that I've reflected on recently as I get older and I wish I'd never put as many long hours in. I wish I'd never missed my lunches so often. and I wish I'd have done more one-to-ones with my team. But that's what if so the question was, what would you do with what do you wish you'd done less of? Mine was workload, to be honest. And you're very keen to make a difference yourself in the well-being because everyone wants a piece of you. It's very high profile, but be careful that they don't expect too much too soon from you, because actually I've seen so many well-being leaders burnt out.
Yeah.
And I've nearly had my fingers burnt myself, thinking, oh, particularly globally when you're doing time zones and travel and things, thinking, do you know what? It's not working for me now. I feel really quite fatigued and drained, and I shouldn't feel like this in a well-being role.
Absolutely. The irony of that is never lost on me when I'm stood in front of a team, professing the benefits of well-being, and I've just been on a 5-hour drive and I'm knackered, and I just think,
that's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the dog's been up sick, or the children are screaming, and you're thinking, do you know what? And you put on this mask, and there's a lot of pressure on the well-being to look perfect and to say the right things and all the time. But you're a human being at the end of the day, and actually go with what you feel, but be yourself. If I could give some advice, and I'm told myself here, keep being yourself and be authentic, and people will come to you, and actually we'll have great success.
Yeah. Oh, sounds great. Perfect place to finish, I guess. So last question would be, what's next for you, Robert? Is there anything you'd like to plug to our audience, and where can our listeners find you as well?
I'm terrible at plugging myself, but because I'm a team pro. But at least, well, to be honest, Matt, what it's interesting timing is because I actually finished work about 2 weeks ago. So 2 weeks ago, I left RWE. I hit 58, and I thought, do you know, one of the things I always want to do is set my own company up, and the work. I've worked for 3 major big global companies, but I've never worked with SMEs, never worked with people in charities and public sector. So I've set me on. I've taken the plunge. I've dipped my toe in the water. I've taken I call it semi-retirement. So I've set up my own company, and I've called it Haldane Health. And Haldane Health is my middle name. I'm from the Shetlands. My family's from the Shetlands. So I thought, I couldn't think of a name. I thought, I'll just make it personal, be authentic. I'll use that. And then I'm just going to do the things I like. So care, the 3 C's. Care is well-being stuff. Coaching is what I do, and compliance is what I do. So I'm just started off working these 3 C areas, and I'm just going to do good work with good people and see where it brings me. But I'm only going to work part-time. And that's my kind of really strict thing, because I've learned over the years that if you could work 16 hours a day if you wanted to. There's plenty of work out there, but you've got to be disciplined with yourself to make sure that you have that healthy work-life integration. So set me on. You will see me on LinkedIn, Robert Manson, LinkedIn, and this new thing called Haldane Health. So I'm going to just go with it and go with the energy. And slow down a bit is what I'm trying to do, Matt.
Yeah, sounds good. It's good luck that health was your middle name as well.
Haldane Health, Haldane Health Limited.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Matt. Thank you so much. I'm sure our listeners will love this episode. And let's hopefully speak to you again in the future.
Thanks, Matt. Nice to spend time with you.
All the best. Cheers.
Cheers then. Take care. Bye-bye.